Welcome back, book talk enthusiasts, to another exciting episode of Dragons and Spaceships, where we shine a spotlight on all the sci-fi and fantasy books that are taking the platform by a storm. I'm your host, Brandi, and today we're going to dive into a book that has me absolutely hooked. Pun intended. We're talking about a book that has been making waves in the dark romance genre, Hooked by Emily McIntyre. If you love twisted fairy tales, morally gray characters, and a romance that is both intense and dark, then this episode is for you. But before we dive into this book, let's take a look at the Realm and Galactic rankings of trending books this week. First, we have The Dead Cat Tail Assassins by P. Clarke, Mistress of Lies by K.M. and Wright, The Girl with No Reflection by Keshi Chow, Medici Heist by Caitlin Schneiderhan, The Ravenous Fate by Haley Dennings. Now back to our topic at hand. Hooked is part of Emily McIntyre's Never After series, and it is a reimagining of the classic Peter Pan story, but don't expect any pixie dust or flying boys in green tights here. McIntyre takes the familiar characters we all know and love, like Wendy, Peter, Smee, and of course, Captain Hook, and transforms them into something darker and more complex. First, let's read the Goodreads summary. From USA Today, best-selling author Emily McIntyre comes a dark and delicious fractured fairy tale reimagining of Peter Pan. He wants revenge, but he wants her more. James has always had one agenda: destroy his enemy, Peter Michaels. When Peter's 20-year-old daughter Wendy shows up in James's bar, he sees his way in, seduce the girl, and use her for his revenge. It's the perfect plan until things in James's organization begin to crumble. Suddenly, he has to find the traitor in his midst, and his plan for revenge gets murkier as James starts to see Wendy as more than just a pawn in his game. Wendy has been cloistered away most of her life by her wealthy, cold father, but a spontaneous night out with friends turns into an intense and addictive love affair with the dark and brooding James. As much as she knows James is dangerous, Wendy can't seem to shake her desire for him. But as the relationship grows more heated and she learns more about the world he moves in, she finds herself unsure if she is falling for the man known as James or the monster known as Hook. Hooked is a dark contemporary romance and the first complete standalone in the Never After series, a collection of fractured fairy tales where the villains get a happy ever after. It is not a literal retelling and not fantasy. Hooked features mature themes and content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Reader discretion is advised. For all content warnings, check out the author's website. Peter Pan, as the character we know from the original story, does not appear in Hooked. However, the character of Peter Michaels serves as the equivalent of Peter Pan in this dark reimagining. He is portrayed as the main antagonist, a manipulative and power-hungry figure responsible for the tragedies in Hook's life. The story uses familiar names and themes from Peter Pan tale, but presents them in a much darker and more complex light. James Hook, our protagonist, is a brooding crime lord with a tragic past, and his nemesis is none other than Peter Michaels, who, in this version, is the true villain. What I really loved about this reimagining is how McIntyre adds so much depth to these characters. Hook isn't just one-dimensional bad guy. He's someone who has been through hell and is driven by a need for revenge. It's fascinating to see how McIntyre turns him into a sympathetic anti-hero while making Peter the character we love to hate. Now, let's talk about the romance, which is a huge part of what makes Hooked so engaging. The relationship between Hook and Wendy is what you'd call an enemies-to-lover dynamic. And McIntyre nails it. From the first encounter, you can feel the tension between them. Wendy, who starts out as this innocent, strong-willed character, gets pulled deeper into Hook's world, and their chemistry is just off the charts. What's really interesting is how their relationship evolves. At first, Hook sees Wendy as just a pawn in his game of revenge against her father, but as they spend more time together, his feelings for her become genuine. This adds a layer of emotional complexity to the story as Hook has to navigate his growing feelings for Wendy while still being driven by his need for vengeance. It's intense, it's emotional, and it keeps you turning the pages. But let's not forget, this is a dark romance, and McIntyre does not shy away from exploring some pretty heavy themes. The book touches on trauma, revenge, and the blurred lines between right and wrong. Hook's backstory is tragic, and it really shapes who he is and the choices he makes throughout the story. At the same time, Wendy's character development is about coming to terms with the truth about her father and figuring out where her loyalties lie. One thing that some readers might find challenging is how dark the romance can get. There's manipulation, emotional intensity, and a power dynamic that might not be everyone's cup of tea. But if you're into stories that explore the darker side of love and human nature, Hooked delivers on all fronts. So, who should pick up Hooked? If you're a fan of dark romance, fractured fairy tales, and morally gray characters, this book is definitely for you. And it's a fresh and gripping take on a classic story with enough twists and emotional depth to keep you hooked. No pun intended this time. However, it is important to note that this book deals with mature themes and might not be for everyone. If you are sensitive to darker elements in romance, you might want to proceed with caution. But if you're ready to dive into a world where the lines between good and evil are blurred, then Hooked is a book you won't want to miss. But before we go today, we have our 2 other segments to go over. First, we have Dragon's Roar. In today's Dragon Roar, we're diving into the latest drama or news in the book industry. Rebecca Yarros has been in a little vacation bubble, and she finally came out to share with us the exclusive first look at her Fourth Wings paperback. This new limited edition paperback will be featured with sprayed stencil edges just like the first Fourth Wing book, but as well as an exclusive Xaden never-before-seen chapter. This one will be available on September 17th. It is so beautiful, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. Next, we have the Sorcerer Scrolls, where we look at some forthcoming fables and quests that you can embark on soon. Next, we have the Sorcerer Scrolls, where you can look at some forthcoming fables and quests you can embark on soon. We Shall Be Monsters is a highly anticipated fantasy novel inspired by Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. The story reimagines the classic tale with a fresh perspective, exploring themes of creation, identity, and the monstrous within us all. The protagonist, an outcast girl with a mysterious past, discovers that she has the power to animate the dead. As she delves deeper into her abilities, she grapples with the moral implications of her power and the consequences of defying nature. The novel promises to blend gothic horror with lyrical prose, offering a dark and thought-provoking take on the themes of humanity and monstrosity. Fans of retellings and dark fantasy are eagerly awaiting this release. The release date for We Shall Be Monsters was February 6, 2024, but I thought I would highlight it because it goes very similarly with what we are talking about today. Well, that's it for today's episodes of Dragons and Spaceships. Thanks for joining us on this journey throughout the realms and the starships. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Emily McIntyre's Hooked. If you've read the book, I'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to find us on social media for more quick and engaging book reviews and recommendations. Until next time, happy reading and stay curious. Keep exploring the fantastical and the futuristic, and may your TBR pile never stop growing.